This week's blog post is my timeline from 1900 to 2021, Part 7, covering 1960 to 1969. This is the 7th of 12 posts with an illustrated decade-by-decade timeline for the years 1900 to 2021. This post is a teaser. It is not the full text for 1960 to 69. To receive a PDF of the text for this decade, you can join my free email list by going to the URL that's on the screen. Let's talk about the events of this decade. As I said, this is a selection. The Vietnam War went on from 1950 to 1975. The first 700 U.S. troops, which were just advisory, arrive in 1961. By 1963, there are 16,000 troops. After 1966, with the draft instituted, there were more than 500,000 American troops. 1964, the Civil Rights Act outlaws racial segregation in schools, public places, and employment. 1965, the Voting Rights Act prohibits racial discrimination in voting. 1965 also, Medicare and Medicaid are established as part of LBJ's War on Poverty. Other social welfare programs passed by Congress in 1964 to 68 include the Job Corps, the Food Stamp Act, funding for schools in low-income neighborhoods, and low-cost housing. 1965, in Griswold versus Connecticut, the Supreme Court strikes down bans on contraceptives. 1967, in Lovin versus Virginia, the Supreme Court strikes down bans on interracial marriage. 1967, the Six-Day War pits Egypt, Jordan, and Syria against Israel. Israel gains control of the Sinai, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. 1968, Czechoslovakia's Prague Spring was suppressed by Russian tanks. 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in April and Robert F. Kennedy in June. From 1960 to 68 in Africa, 32 countries become independent of their former European rulers. Many of them are communist. The balance of power in the United Nations shifts from the United States and its allies to the USSR and its allies. New movements include women's liberation, black power, gay liberation, the Chicano movement, and the environmentalist movement. Under science and technology, in 1961, the USSR sends the first man into space. In 1969, Neil Armstrong of Apollo 11 walks on the moon. The 60s saw the beginning of the Internet as a way for military researchers to communicate. In this decade, Norman Borlaug, the father of the Green Revolution, is credited with improvements in agricultural production that save 1 billion lives. Think about that next time you see an anti-GMO ad. Books from 1960 to 69 include Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird, 1960, which involves a lawyer with integrity and racial issues in small-town Alabama during the Great Depression. It's told through the eyes of a 6-year-old. Mario Puzo's The Godfather came out in 1969 and showed the mafia as, quote, heroes, unquote. Rachel Carson's Silent Spring came out in 1962 and condemns the use of DDT. In art, cutting edge includes Roy Lichtenstein, who does close copies of comic book images, and Louise Nevelson, who does steel constructions that are painted white or black. In architecture, we have Eero Saarinen's TWA terminal at JFK Airport, which opened in 1962. In movies, Breakfast at Tiffany's, 1961, The Graduate, 1967. In TV, Star Trek, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and Batman. In music, Beatlemania begins in 1964. Albums on LPs become the dominant form of music consumption, and best-selling album artists include the Beatles, Elvis, Simon and Garfunkel, Bob Dylan, Led Zeppelin, and the Jackson 5. If you go to my website, dianeduranteWriter.com, this blog post has a series of questions that I would love to hear from you on. If you want to join the free Sunday Recommendations email list, visit the URL that's on the screen or email me. And you can say, well done, Diane, or support my work and receive rewards by means of the tip jar on dianeduranteWriter.com. As always, thank you for listening.